All right, nice to meet you guys. I'll be seeing you next week, right? Next Friday. And hello, Jujunai. Long time. She's the TA at Beijing University. For your information, the class at Beijing University is always small. Well, let me not say anything further than that. All right. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about what culture is and also Korean culture. Okay? So, like I said before, culture is the foundation of everything. Okay? Society, politics, cuisine, your ideas, philosophy, religion, you name it. It's all it all pertains to culture. Jungji?
Good.
Laptop, please.
No laptops allowed in class.
So, with that in mind, could you close your laptop, please? All right. So, here's what I'll be talking about again for the next 3 weeks. Starting off with some fun. I'll be showing you a set of numbers about Korea, and I want you to guess what those numbers mean. Sort of testing your knowledge of Korea. And excuse me for not moving around, because as you can see, the lecture is being recorded for posterity. So don't worry, you will not be shown, just me, right? And then I'll sort of talk about why understanding what culture is important for all of us, okay? Especially in the forthcoming era of fourth industrial revolution, okay? And then I'll be talking about what culture is, and then the rest, okay? All right, so here is Korea introduction, and let's have some fun. So Korea in numbers. The first one is 1.6555 trillion. And what am I talking about?
GDP?
Very good. Do you have a microphone for students?
Oh, I prepare.
Yeah.
I prepare just after the break. You see? Okay. Or right now, let me go to the office.
Yes, it's Korea's GDP last year, and that's 11th largest in the world. That's pretty good, right? And it is even more impressive when you see this number. In 1953, Korea's total GDP was $1.3 billion. And who is a mathematic wizard in this room? So in that span, from 1953 to 2018, Korea's GDP jumped how many times? Roughly? It jumped nearly 1,300 times. Okay, you can name many countries that have economically advanced since the end of World War II. Okay? And you cannot name that many, right? How many countries do you think have industrialized since the end of World War II, newly? 5.
5 to 10.
I think when you say 10, you are including those which are still industrializing at this point, including China,
Brazil.
India, Brazil, Russia, right? I'm talking about countries that are industrialized, like Korea, since World War II. You can only name 4. Taiwan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong. If you were to categorize Hong Kong as an independent country, right? So achieving this industrialized status itself is very difficult. But for Korea, they have done this in this manner, meaning, with the GDP jumping like 1,300 times. It's really, really amazing. Okay? And you know what 30-50 is? And I'm sure you have no idea what this means, so I'll show it to you right away. So 30 refers to per capita gross national income of $30,000. Okay? I'll get back to you a little bit later. And 50 means more than 50 million population. Yes, your question.
No, I didn't have a question. I knew what it was. So.
Oh, you raised your hand a little bit too late. You know why this is significant? If you were to name some of the richest countries, okay, the countries that enjoy high living standards, I don't know if you know, but most of them have small population. Okay, like New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Switzerland, New Zealand, and so on. So actually there are 27 countries in the world today which have a per capita income of more than $30,000. Okay? So per capita meaning per person, right? Now, out of the 27 countries that have higher than per capita income of $30,000, only 7 countries have more than 50 million population, including South Korea. So South Korea became the latest 7th member in this 30-50 club. Just for fun, what are 6 other countries that have more than 50 million population with per capita income of $30,000? And speak loud, please.
France.
France.
US.
US.
UK.
UK.
Germany?
Yeah, Germany.
Germany?
Germany. 2 more.
Italy?
Yes, Italy. Last one.
Spain.
Not 50 million.
Okay.
You're missing the largest economy in this world.
Japan.
US?
No, Japan.
Oh,
No. That's
yes, Japan. Well, USA was mentioned, right? Right away,
USA.
right? So, can you repeat the 6 countries again? Since you have the microphone. What do you
I'll
know?
repeat them. So France, Germany, UK, US, Japan.
You're missing one.
Oh, and Italy.
Yes, thank you. So these 6 countries, for a long time, have been in this very unique club, elite club, 30-50. Okay, having a high living standard with such a big population. So this shows you it is very difficult for a country with a large population to actually enjoy a high living standard. Okay, so that's what the 30-50, like this particular number, means for Korea. Okay, so there you go. U.S., UK, Germany, France, Japan, and Italy. Okay. Next, so this is the kind of if you were to put what Korea's economic achievement look like, visually, that's what the figure looks like. Okay? Well, before I move on, did you guys all say hello to each other when you came to class today? Well, if you forgot, next week we'll start again. I'll be asking you this question every week. Okay? And hopefully try to sit together, so that you can communicate, kind of, right? Anyway, how many of you have been to Cheonggyecheon in downtown area? That's what it used to look like in the 1950s. It's the exact same area, with no exaggeration. And what does it look like now? That's the stream, right? Right? And that's the same stream in the 1950s. Just stark, very stark difference you could see. Very telling too, right? Next is rather easy. 51 million, roughly. It's
Population.
yes, Korean population, and it's 26th largest in the world. In 1948, I think at least the Korean students should be able to answer this question, no? Yes?
Like the independence?
Independence happened in 1945.
Uh,
It's actually not that difficult to memorize that. Why? Korean liberation happened because Japan lost World War II.
yeah.
So it coincides with the end of World War II. So Korea was liberated in 1945. So this must be establishment of the Republic of Korea. So Korea as a nation, as you can see, is very young. It has a really short history, like most other former colonies. Okay, I don't know if you know, but the most former colonies became independent countries after World War II. Okay, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, right? So Korea, in a way, is one of them, right? 70. If anybody gets this right, I'm willing to get that person a personally stirred Maxim coffee. Korean pride. Have you had Maxim coffee yet? If for you to say, I was in Korea for a semester, and to say that you haven't tried Maxim coffee, wow. Again, not those coffee that you pay 101 for. Talking about Maxim, particular brand. This Korean mixed coffee, best in the world. So I'm bringing that personally stirred cup of Maxim coffee to the student who gets this question right. What does number 70 mean for Korea? Give up? Yes.
Age average?
You're talking about the
Population
life
age?
expectancy?
Yeah, life expectancy or population age, like if you do an average of
Oh,
30 years old to 70
Korea,
years.
Korea is a nation cannot be that old. That's been seriously old, right? But nice try, because I think that number does relate to old age, right? How in Korea is definitely an aging society, right? So this number is actually this. Did you notice how wherever you go, there are mountains, right? Korea is seriously a country of mountains. Okay? And look at this. So actually, the most mountainous country in the world is actually Bhutan. Almost 99% of the land there. That is why if you ever want to fly to Bhutan, you better be careful, because their airports only allows the most experienced pilots to land there. Because the air, like runway, is very short. Okay? And of course, of all the countries there, the country that you probably is most familiar with is Switzerland, right? But the reason I'm showing you number 70 is this. Did you know that Koreans love hiking. I don't know if you know, have you like tried like getting on the subway on weekends? Because that's when you'll see a lot of people with backpacks and their peculiar outdoor dresses, right? You could see right away they're going hiking, right? And so if you want to do something that is related to Guinness World Record, try hiking Bukhansan. Okay, that's a mountain in the center of Seoul. It holds the Guinness record as being the most visited mountain in the world on an annual basis. Right? And because there are so many mountains in Korea, it's really an important part of Korean cultural identity. Okay? And hiking, why isn't hiking more popular in Switzerland or Bhutan? Why is it only in Korea you see so many people hiking? It's number one pastime. Some people say it's fishing, but I do strongly believe hiking is definitely number one pastime. Why is it that? Why isn't hiking? If you were to say at least 50% of the population in Korea have tried hiking, and 1/3 of the population enjoy hiking on a regular basis. And if you don't see similar figures in Switzerland or Bhutan, why do you think that is the case? And are you thinking? Yes.
Maybe the mountains in Switzerland and Bhutan, they're too high for people to go up to the summit in one day, but in Korea they're relatively short, so people
Thank
can
you.
go up there.
That is a perfect answer. Most Korean mountains are about 1,000 or less than 1,000 meters above the sea level. Whereas most mountains in Switzerland, for example, would be like 3,000, 4,000 meters above the sea level. And in Bhutan, it'll be like Himalayan type, right? So most mountains in Korea, you could do a whole hiking in 5 hours. Some mountains, 3 hours. So that's why this natural sort of environment made hiking enjoyable. Okay? Something that anyone can do in a way, right? So, especially for exchange students, if you want to try something really Korean, you gotta go try hiking. Okay? But in packing like foods, please don't pack like Big Mac or hamburgers, right? Because cold burgers taste terrible, don't they? So try something, I guess, Korean, kimbap. So this is the kind of scene that you're likely to see when you go outside of the city, right? Just driving or being on a bus, mountains. And this is Seoul, which is surrounded by mountains, right? There you go. And what did I say about hiking being the most popular pastime? This is on weekend. This is a Bukhansan. Okay? It has many peaks, but every peak on weekends will be like that. You know, you have to actually line up to get to the top, and it is so crowded. I don't want to imagine this, but maybe it could be pushed off too. I don't know. that's I'm not joking. It is very crowded. Okay? And that's a Buddhist temple, and every mountain has not just one, but many. Not just one temple, but many temples. Okay? So people who go hiking, even if they're not Christian, Buddhist, they go to the temple to pray, because they see sort of, not everyone, but some people see Buddhism as sort of a cultural practice. Okay? So I don't know if any Christian would go to the temple to pray, but it's not a stretch if a Christian did go. Okay? Um, and guess who that is? That's moi. Yes, I enjoy hiking. I go almost every weekend. So I strongly recommend, suggest that a Korean student, right, organize hiking. So you guys should all be, be friends, right? Don't just, try to look for like clubs outside the classroom. It could easily be done among you guys, right? Going to hiking and stuff, right? So these are the pictures which show that even our ancestors enjoyed hiking. Going up the mountain to talk about BTS. I don't know. Future BTS. 57. This is a very difficult number to associate, sort of link this number to Korea, but this is what it is. World Happiness Report by the UN. So I left out the 1 to 56, or 52, but since I said 57, right, it's somewhere here. The reason I wanted to bring this up is this. Yes, Korea has a number 11 largest economy in the world, but are Koreans really that happy? And also the fact that Korea has one of the highest suicide rates. Okay? So everything comes in sort of set of opposites, right? So you have this bright, happy-looking data, but then on the other side, something like this, which shows that although we are materially well off or prosperous, maybe psychologically we may not be as happy as it should be, right? So I hope I'll get a chance to talk about happiness, whether you need money to be happy. Does money bring you happiness? Okay. So we'll talk about that if we do have a chance. And I, wanted to show you this too. And at the bottom, Americans may be over-reliant or overusing depressant or antidepressant. Just to give you a sense of how maybe Koreans are not as happy as they should be because they're not taking enough antidepressants, maybe. Or that, so sometimes data like this tell you so much about a given culture. Okay? From this, another thing you could probably catch is this, that we have a very strong stigma attached to mental mental illness or people suffering from depression. So instead of telling others and trying to seek help, we try to hide. Okay? If you ever had a session with a psychiatrist, it's something that you never reveal to anybody. Okay? Because people think that you're mentally not well, and that's always been seen in a very negative way, right? So the fact that the Koreans take so few antidepressants is not something they should be bragging about. Okay? It shows you on one side that they're not being forthright about what's really bothering them. Okay? 17. So I'll not wait for your answer when I see a number that I sort of believe you'll never guess. Okay? Or should I wait at least a second for your response? 17. No, this is not the age where we allow youngsters to become adults. No. Korea is the world's 7th healthiest country. Okay? So there you go. So Spain is number 1. Okay? So maybe you're all looking to see where is my country, and just for fun, anybody want to say, oh, my country is this, and it's ranked whatever. Anybody? Yes.
My country is ranked 15, Netherlands.
15. Netherlands. Congratulations. If your country is not in the top 20, just for you, I have a bigger table. And anyone? So next person. So you wanna? Since you were about to raise your hand, yes.
Me?
Yeah.
My country is 16.
Oh.
Canada.
Canada. Well, thank you, Canada. All right. Anyone in this? Yes.
My country is 35.
35.
Okay.
Oh, I shouldn't be laughing. Oops. Okay, USA, 35. 7. This number pertains to our love for motor vehicles. Korea is 7th largest motor vehicle manufacturing country in the world. Okay? And just for fun, which country do you think manufactures the largest number of motor vehicles?
Germany.
Germany?
Japan.
It's not. Japan is not. I'm sure someone will say the USA too, right?
Germany.
No. Number 1. By far. You know the difference between number 1 rank, number 2? Almost double. Believe it or not. Number 1 is China. Why? The reason why you don't hear about all these Chinese cars is because they're not at the stage of exporting them. Most of the cars are for domestic use. Okay. Number 2, USA, not even half. You see the difference? Isn't that amazing? Okay. Number 3, Japan. Number 4, Germany. Number 5, India. Number 6, Mexico. Okay. So Korea was as high as number 5. But it's been sort of pushed out by countries like India and Mexico. Number 5. Number 5 is this. Korea is 5th in the world in terms of the percentage of 25 to 64-year-olds with college education. Okay, it stands at about 45%. But give Korea maybe 20 years, it'll be number 1. Okay, I'm not saying this in any proud manner. I'm saying this with a really strong sense of reservation, because we have too many people going to college, and it's not helpful. Because I think we have the world's highest unemployment rate of those with college degrees. Okay? So I'm just pointing this out. Okay? So here's a really nice figure. As you can see here, it's between the age of 25 to 64. Korea is yellow, number 5 at 45%. Okay, but look at this age group, 25 to 34. Korea is number 1 by far. Okay, and that's gonna, sort of expand. Okay, as the population get older, that's gonna be the norm, right? We're gonna get back to the education part a little bit later. Number 4, really easy one. And you're gonna laugh because maybe you will think it's silly or trivial. Yes.
Rice consumer?
What
Rice
consumer?
consumer? Like
Rice.
eating rice or producing rice maybe?
Oh. Good try. No. Anyone else? Again, easy but it is very true about Korea. Hmm? Drinking country. Anyway, so here we go. Anyway, here we go. Forces. Just for fun, how many of you come from a country which does not have four seasons? Hands up. Where you from?
I live in Los Angeles, so we don't really have.
That's right. Almost like two. Right? So maybe I should take this out. It's nothing really. Number 3. Korea is third in the world in most annual working hours, as you can see there. But Korea has been number 1 for a very long time. Okay? But Koreans are always working. Did you notice that? Always working. But I think so again, some figures I show you or data, don't ever think that I'm sort of showcasing whatever it is to sort of, give you an idea that Korea is doing everything good. Okay? I'm just sharing with you facts. Okay? And even here, fact is, Koreans work long hours, more than, compare Korean work hours with German work hours. Almost, more than 500-hour difference, right? On an annual basis. But are they working really hard? Now, how do you measure anybody working hard? Anyway, there's a thing called labor productivity. Look at where Korea is. And look where Germany is, or Ireland. So this is a serious problem for Korean workers. They're at work, the longest, almost the longest in the world. But what are they doing? And this graph shows you. Okay? And there's South Korea too, not doing well. Okay? Number 2, this one is also easy. Again, about Korea, anything. Culture, society again? Yeah, very good, thank you. You said it too fast, because I was going to almost say, Maxim, then. Anyway, 2 Koreas, South Korea, North Korea, and this is DMZ. And God knows when 2 Koreas will reunify, right? So when you have a chance, do go visit. Okay? I don't know if Koreans are allowed to visit now, but it's only for the longest time it's open only to foreigners. Okay? And it's really an amazing place to visit. Okay? To actually see North Korean soldiers. I don't know if you could actually go there, but there is a DMZ tour, right? In which you could participate. Okay? They provide you with lunch too. Okay? And this is where the 2 sides are divided. This is this is the North Korean side. No, this is the Korean side. That's North Korean side. Okay? And that's Trump stepping over, just to say, hey, I'm the first American president to step on North Korean soil. Number 2, continuing with number 2, Korea is number 2 in the world in terms of recycling rates. Okay? We really recycle everything. Wow. Okay, number 1. So this is the last number, of course. I don't have any number in digits. Anything about Korea that is number 1? If you love Korea, you must know something about Korea that is number 1. Yes?
The plastic surgery capital?
Well, yes, I don't have it in my slides, but that is true. So make sure you know this, right? That it is not in terms of the number of plastic procedures that have been performed that is Korea's number one. It is in terms of the number of procedures performed per 1,000 population, or let's call it per capita. Okay, and that, yes, Korea is number one. Yes.
Recently killed themselves.
Oh. So it's sort of a. I mean, if you say number one among the OECD countries, it's true. But whether it's number one in the world, it's questionable. Because if some data show Korea being sort of superseded by a couple of other countries, okay? And you don't really have good data. So some countries, latest is from 2015, Korean data from 2018. So that's why you cannot say definitively that Korea has the world's highest suicide rate. But safe to say, it is definitely one of the highest in the world. Okay? But if you're not keep up with like number one among OECD countries. Okay? Anything else? All right, so let's move on. Korea has the. Did you notice that your internet speed is rather fast or not? No? Oh, no response really. Anyway, we do have that record. So average connection speed. I don't know if that really accounts for fast internet speed or not, but that's the figure I have. Second, it's another figure related to education. Korea is actually now number one in the world in terms of the proportion of high school graduates attending tertiary education or institution. Yeah? And it's 60%. And if you compare this with countries like Japan, it's really amazing, because you would think that Japan would be pretty much like Korea when it comes to sort of the people's preoccupation with education, but they have sort of moved on, whereas Koreans still pretty much fixated on education. And let me tell you once again why this is not a good thing for Korean society. You see, when so many people graduate from universities and colleges, the next step for society is to provide jobs for them, right? Jobs that are compatible with their educational background. But no economy in the world, whether it's United States, Germany, doesn't matter. No matter how advanced an economy is, a really healthy figure for high school graduates to move on to college is about 30 to 40%. Okay? Any number or proportion beyond that is too many or too much. Okay? So that's why I'm showing you this as a fact, but not something that is desirable, okay, for Korea. And when we get to talk about the topic on education, we'll try to, understand the reasons why so many Koreans want to go to college, okay? Especially the top universities. Okay? Number one is your favorite, especially for female students, I think, is BTS. Okay? In case you don't know how they look like, there you go. They had number one album in Billboard 200. You know how big that is? And I'm not saying this because I'm a big fan of BTS. Billboard 200 is like, to have a #1 album there is a dream for every recording artist. And they did it for the first time for any Korean and for the first time for any Asian to do that. So they're not only first Korean, but first Asian to do that. And did they just do it once? They did it 3 times in less than a year. You know who did it last before the BTS? Believe it or not, the Beatles. That's why they're considered Beatles without English. Beatles who eat kimchi. Beatles who drink soju, no. They're too young, aren't they? Anyway, so I'm sure I'll talk more about them when I get to the part on Hallyu. Okay? Continuing with other #1s about Korea. Korea has the highest internet penetration rate at 96%. Korea has the highest smartphone penetration rate among adults at 94%. Okay, that's it. Now, before I move on, can you think of any other numbers and sort of the facts about Korea that should be included? Yes.
I think it's like 1.60 something of the low birth rate.
Oh. Actually, it's not even 1. The fertility rate, which is the number of children a woman has from age 15 to 49, was last year 0.98, and that is for sure lowest in the world. Okay, the lowest. And why is that terrible? For society to maintain a stable population, you know how many children each woman should have in any given society? It's 2.1. Okay? Why 2.1? Not 2? Because if couples get married and then they have children, 2 would be good enough, right? The 2 die, 2 live. But why 2.1? Because some die before they reach adulthood or before they reach reproductive age. So we're having less than half of what is desirable level of fertility rate. So when we get to the part on family, we'll try to understand why so many women in Korea are refusing to have children or just have one, right? And the reasons are not that difficult to guess, right? I mean, you ask Korean students in this room whether they enjoyed their youth, studying all the time to get to the top university, So anyway, that's a good one. Anyone else with any other #1s, good or bad or ugly? So if you do think about something, you could always write to me. Okay? You and I, our interactions are not limited to the classroom setting, but if you have something to say, email me, right? Anyway, so having done this, introduction of Korea in numbers, we move on to the next one, significance of culture. Humanity or civilization has gone through many eras or periods or ages throughout history, including religion, scientific revolution, industrial revolution, modernization, and right now we're going through still going through the era of globalization, and we will soon enter an era of the fourth industrial revolution, right? Now, some say that present period is an era of culture. Now, of course, is culture a new thing? It's always been around, right? It's what makes us what we are, right? Now, why do I have Apple there? What's that Apple guy? Which Apple guy I'm talking about? When I say Apple guy, who comes to your mind? See, this is generation gap. When I was growing, when I was your age, when someone asked me, who's the Apple guy? It was Isaac Newton. Right? And that's the Apple guy I'm talking about. And why did I bring his name? Bring up his name? Because until he conceptualized this idea of gravity, wasn't there gravity on the planet? Of course, it's always been around, but it took him to make sense of what it is. Okay? Same thing with globalization. Globalization entered the Webster Dictionary in 1961, which means that's when people began to understand what globalization is, but does it mean that globalization began to happen from 1961? No. It's been around for, depending on how you define globalization, hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? So that's what culture is, but all of a sudden, we're paying more attention to culture. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed that, but you know what the word of the year was for the Webster Dictionary in 2014? Easy question. Culture, believe it or not. And why did they decide on culture? Because that particular word had most searches on the Webster Dictionary website. Okay? So this really shows you how we are more concerned, we are more interested, and we're definitely paying more attention to it. Okay? So here's some terms that culture is featured in many sort of trends. Okay? Can you think of any examples where we use culture to express a phenomenon or a trend? This is your chance to shine. Give me your culture, okay? The culture that nobody knows about or is hot. No, I'm talking about something culture. So you must know quite a few.
K-pop culture.
Okay, K-pop culture. Anything else?
Food culture.
Hmm?
Food culture.
Food culture. Thank you. Anything else? Religious culture.
Generational culture, so millennials and Gen Z and Alzheimer's.
So what do you say? Generational culture?
Yeah, like 5-year generation as the culture, local aspects like music or trends or even the technology of the time.
Anyway, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't really fit in nicely like something culture, right? So, anyway, I was hoping that you would say more about this example, but here we go. And there are many, many more, of course. Family culture, leisure culture, corporate culture, popular culture, city culture, consumer culture, dating culture. See, these terminologies have not been around for the long time. They're really new. Okay? And do you know what hombap culture is? Eating by yourself. Finally, Koreans are eating by themselves. Westerners, they love eating alone. You go to a cafeteria, but you see Korean, they walk into a cafeteria, if they don't find anybody they know, they walk out. Not all the time, but I'm sure young people now are more familiar with eating alone, right? But my generation, it was definitely no. Okay? And 혼술 culture is drinking by yourself. Okay? Now, if you go to a drinking place, we have a bar. Okay? 20 years ago, we didn't have bars. Do you know what I mean by bar? Because it tailors to those who come by themselves and drink alone. But because we didn't have that culture, because drinking is always something that you do with others. So that's why we didn't have bars. Okay? We didn't have this bar culture. Because drinking is always something that, is always associated with, like, drinking together with someone you know, and so on, right? So, we're also fond of saying cultural differences, something has a culture, or it has no culture, and so on, right? So, it is almost safe to say that we have finally discovered culture, okay? And I already mentioned this, right? Culture, word of the year from Merriam-Webster dictionary. Okay? So it reflected the people's desperate desire to learn more about the word. Okay? And it is also argued, are you familiar with the phrase computer illiterate? People who do not know how to operate a computer, right? Same thing. In the near future, people will talk about culture illiterate. People who do not really know what culture is, the true nature of what culture is, or cultural variations or cultural differences, they'll be considered culture illiterate. Okay? And so, and especially because we live in an era where we are interacting with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. Okay? And this classroom is a classic example. You look around, I'm sure you see so many people who you could easily see that they must come from different cultural backgrounds. Okay? So, and after these two questions, we'll take a break. Okay? Two questions about culture. One is, which factors have led us to pay more attention to culture today? Again, culture has been around, I don't know how far you want to go back in time, but let's say when Homo sapiens left Africa 60,000 or 70,000 years ago. Okay? Or when Homo sapiens started to use fire. Okay? Or when they started to make tools. Then you have to go back, maybe 1 million years ago, right? But anyway, but again, what I'm trying to say is culture has been with Homo sapiens for the longest time, but it's just in sort of a past century and now that we're paying more attention to culture. How do we know? As a keyword, if you type culture, you have more hits, okay, from let's say 1970s than ever before. Okay? It's not just the number of sheer, volume. It's just that as a sort of because people's interest increased, there have been that many more writings, there have been that many more books, that there have been more research is done. Okay? So all of that point to this argument that humanity has finally discovered culture, right? So, which factors led to this phenomenon? Yes?
That culture was monetized, so like if you go back, before, like hundreds of years ago, there was no such thing as showcasing one's culture and having like exhibitions of that sort, or like having tourists come to the country to see the culture. So because of the culture be monetized, being sold as almost an attraction. There is a market trying to see the differences in cultures. And also since like now the borders of countries are pretty much established, instead of like back in the 40s with World War II, people can actually claim this is my country's culture, and they also can claim it as a country's culture.
Okay, I don't know if I could repeat what you just said, but okay, from now on, if you were to speak, please, is there just one microphone, right?
Yes, sir.
So let's make a habit of like grabbing the microphone from wherever it is and then talk. Okay. So sorry for the inconvenience. So what do you mean by monetized?
So that, for example, like here you can try on a handbag, here you can try on handbags.
It's turned on.
No?
Okay, so so handbags, for example, you can go and try them on and walk around with them, which wasn't as popular back in the day. Or like just there are exhibitions on a country's culture where you pay a fee and go in to see it, which before that wasn't considered as a culture.
So I guess if I could just summarize, there is a greater exposure to different cultures. Okay. Anyway, so yes.
Yeah, I think what you're saying also has to do with space-time compression in general. So the fact that it's easier to travel to different countries, and also due to, of course, internet, things like this, the technological advances, it's easier to access different cultures and to see what they're like. So I think this exposure, this contact, has led to focus then also on the differences between cultures.
Okay. So the gentleman next to you.
Basically, I think they're talking about globalization. So because of globalizations, you're able to meet new people from all over the country. You can travel to new places. You can meet people through internet and talk to them about their culture. And because we're exposed to different cultures, we're more into culture now. So that's the factor that led us to pay attention more to the culture.
Very
now.
good. You know, the keywords you said, globalization, and also like the internet, right? The technological advances. But here's something I want to share with you first, and this is probably the most important aspect. Okay? People all over the world began to pay more attention to culture because they took care of the most important matter in life, and that is, you know, the food, the shelter, because all human efforts were focused on taking care of the basic necessities, and these were finally taken care of. I mean, it's difficult to really pinpoint to a particular timeline, but you could easily say that things were pretty much better than before, starting from, let's say, the period of Industrial Revolution. And that, even that is sort of a stretch, because yes, when it began, it still took a few decades before the fruits of all the technological advances made a difference in making the life of the ordinary person better, right? So this is what many scholars say, that even in the West, and of course in Korea too, if you look at how, just I'm not saying what I'm about to say sort of are everything about culture, but if you look at Korean professional sports, the television culture, the movie industry, music industry, why didn't they explode, let's say, 50 years ago? It's a very recent phenomenon, right? So Korean sort of a culture industry, their expansion and growth coincides with Korea's industrialization. So this is just one indication which shows you that it takes time. It took time for humanity to have this sort of a, to achieve, certain level of living standard first. And then once that was achieved, finally were given this leisure time to divert their attention to something different. Okay? So that's what number one point is. Number one there is saying. Okay? Number two is this. The advent of technologies enable people to have access to various cultural experiences, direct or indirect, and the technologies here refer to transportations like cars, trains, jet airplanes. Do you know what the average speed of steamboat engine sort of using ship was, or is even today? Anyway, boats, or not boats, but ships using steam engine sort of machinery could reach the speed of 100 kilometers per hour at best. So, but look at jet airplanes. It could move. It has a speed of between 500 to 700 miles per hour. So that's higher than like 1,000 kilometers per hour, right? So transportation technology, the advances in transportation technology really shrunk our sense of distance and time, right? And more importantly, in a way, is the media technologies, right? Newspapers, magazines, books, radio, television, and most importantly, the internet, right? So, is there anybody who wants to add to, as an answer to question number one? Something that happened that made us pay more attention to culture? Yes? I think you should always leave it on.
Politics, like especially the divide between right and left wing, like maybe right wing, like preserving your culture, like what makes your own culture or a nation's culture, and like say for the left, being aware of different cultures and being sensitive to that. So it's kind of categorizing culture in a way.
Wow, that's difficult for me to sort of categorize, but a very interesting idea. Politics, the divide between the conservatives and liberals or progressives. Something to think about. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Okay, before I turn to the next slide, any other examples? Yes.
Tea.
Tea. What is tea?
Like tea, that's a drink.
Oh, tea.
Yeah.
Oh yes, of course. You can actually have tea next to coffee, right? Yes. Oh, the shaking hands?
Yes.
Oh. Yes. I think definitely we, traditionally do not shake hands. It was always bowing, but now we shake hands, right? Very good. Anyone else? Last call. Last two calls. Yes. Sports. Sports. So you could maybe say soccer, right? Or golf. Yes. Spices, yes. So in the case of Korea, the pepper, and of of course, even the red pepper we didn't have until like the 16th or 17th century. So that's why our ancestors only had white kimchi for the longest time. So so that's a really interesting piece of history on kimchi. Anyway, let's move on. So this is, I think, what I've already said. So culture pertains to practically everything we are, what we do and what we think. And we cannot think outside culture, nor can we do anything which culture does not permit us to do. And yet we have very little understanding of what culture is, how it affects us, how it distinguishes us from other species. It's all because we take culture for granted. So in the forthcoming era of the fourth industrial revolution, perhaps our understanding of and sensitivity to culture and cultural differences, complete with all their nuances, could be the only advantage we have over machines. Whew. Isn't this a powerful statement? I wrote this, guys. So that concludes the first answer. Remember the question was, why is it important today to understand culture in general and different cultures in particular? The reason number one was we're living in a globalized world, and the culture that we enjoy are actually not something that is ethnic in origin or national in origin, but it is a sort of a hybrids or cultural products or experiences from outside, right? So that's why we got to have an understanding of culture that is sort of new, right? Reason number two, again, why we need to understand culture is something that is, sort of problem-oriented. Problem because it could lead to tensions and conflicts. Okay, and this is about the influx of migrants and the making of multicultural reality. Okay? As you know, more than ever before, people are migrating, okay? As workers, as brides, as refugees, and in your case, as students. Okay? So, and people expect that international migration will increase even more over the years. Okay? And especially for international migration, because the world inequality will not lessen. Okay? If you ever believed that the world can somehow become less unequal, that's quite people say it's a rather false hope, because countries are not in the game of being nice to each other. It's really a cutthroat competition. Okay? If you see what's happening with the U.S. and China with the trade war, and if you really want to understand why this is happening, type U.S.-China or China-U.S. trade war, and there are many interpretations as to why this is happening. It's not just about imposing tariffs on each other's goods. There's something bigger involved. Okay, and I don't have time to get into that, but think about that. So the point is, the world that we could sort of picture 100 years later, 200 years later, it'll pretty much the same. In a way, rich countries will stay rich and poor countries will stay poor. And as long as that condition persists, people will move about. Okay? So unless you fix, and there is no real answer to this global inequality, the refugee problem, migrant problem will not stop. So anyone hoping or thinking for the future where people finally stop, migrating, it'll not happen. Okay? So with that in mind, this is what I could also tell you. According to a 2018 UN report, there are more than 244 million people, or about 3.3% of the world population, who live in countries outside the countries of their birth. Okay? And every country in the world today is being affected by increases in international migration. And South Korea is no exception. South Korea now is the world's most rapidly ethnically diversifying country in the world. Okay? And as of the end of last year, the number of foreign residents totaled some 2.3 million, or 4.6% of the total population of 51 million. Okay? And in less than 10 years from today, the proportion of foreigners living in Korea is forecast to surpass the 10% mark in just 9 years. Okay? And by 2050, so that's 31 years from now, the proportion of foreigners, including multicultural children, could be as high as 20%. To give you a sense of comparative perspective, okay? So there's the, what's been happening with Korea, okay? From less than 0.1%, it's going to be more than 10% in 9 years, okay? Again, in 2050, it could easily be between 15 and 20% of the total population. Okay? And how does that compare with the rest of the world? So ignore UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar, because the foreigners there, they're not permanent residents. They are temporary workers. Okay? But look at countries like in Europe and North America. Okay? So Australia, close to 30% of the total population comprises of foreigners. New Zealand, 22. Canada, 21. USA, only 15%. So when you think about these countries, you know that there are these visible minorities, and you can see them really rather easily. Korea, in 20, 30 years, will be like New Zealand, will be like the USA. So this is quite a sort of a new situation for Korea, because Korea sort of has been sort of I mean, we are sort of the country as a whole, or the educational system, the government has prided itself as a nation of homogeneous people, right? And that's gonna change quite a bit. Yes.
Yes, I have a question.
Microphone, please.
Hello? So I was wondering, can a foreigner, if he moves to Korea, can you participate in the political system? Can you get Korean citizenship and then?
No, I mean there are certain conditions, right?
Yeah.
The easiest way a foreigner can become a Korean is to marry a Korean, right? And that's universal, right? Any part of the world, if you marry the member of the whole society in any country you go to, then it's almost automatic, right? After a few years of residence, of course, right? And there's also investment visa way you could do, right? So if you could invest more than about $500,000 in Korea, you do qualify for a Korean citizenship in due time. Okay. All right. So the OECD average is there, 12.7%. So the world we live in is multi-ethnic and multicultural, and one of the biggest problems facing humanity today is, I mean, other than like global warming, the environmental crisis, population explosion, the military confrontations, and so on. You know what the biggest threat that is facing us right now? Like, sort of not country to country conflict, but something that is really near us is this and this. Now, I'm sorry for referring to the tragedies happening in the USA, but if you look at some of the mass killings, right? Often we find that they are racism motivated, right? And what happened in Christchurch earlier this year, why did that happen? So, and I included only mass killings, but again, I'm sorry for mentioning the U.S. situation, but in the USA, for example, many homicides do include the motivation is hatred, right? So, and it may not be an issue of homicide, but the fact that there are many tensions that we could easily imagine that happening in any multicultural society. So the problem is definitely the cultural prejudice and intolerance towards different cultures. Okay. So I mean, is this something that you all agree? This part, or is it you feel that it's sort of exaggerated?
I agree.
Anyone who disagrees that we have bigger problems than racial prejudice or intolerance? Anyway, so if we could all agree that this is a major problem, is everyone familiar with what OECD is? Ever since we became a member of this rich country club, it's OECD everything. It's almost no day passes without sort of a news release from OECD ranking Korea, with the suicide rate or educational enrollment rate kind of thing, right? So, and also, are you familiar with PISA? I didn't know until recently that it's administered by OECD. Yeah? So it measures the scholastic competency of 15-year-old students in 80 countries in 3 areas: reading, science, and math. Okay? So, sorry for, I guess I had some trauma with mathematics when I was younger. So, I have science twice. But just last year, PISA added 4th area of assessment, and they call it global competence. And don't you ever wonder why they feel pressed to add a 4th area? Okay? And it happened to be global competence. And what is global competence? And it is this. So again, students, 15-year-old students in 80 countries will be assessed on their level of global competence. And global competence is almost same as cultural competence or intelligence. Do you know what cultural intelligence is? Now, to help you with your understanding, I want to share with you other quotients. You know, Q stands for quotient, right? And what is the most well-known quotient in the world? IQ, thank you. And next one? EQ. Next one? CQ. CQ is a very recent quotient. So there are these other ones. IQ, EQ, network quotient, social quotient, and finally CQ. So you're going to hear a lot about this in the near future. Okay? So if you're hearing this for the first time, remember, okay? Culture quotient or cultural intelligence. And what is cultural intelligence? In a nutshell, that's what it is. Okay? In a globalized world, and in the face of increasing multicultural reality, what one needs is cultural intelligence. So cultural intelligence is the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures. So in your free time, if you're a good student like me, look this up. CQ, cultural intelligence. So this is a very basic definition. And if I were to add impromptu right now, something to this, it would be the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures, and the adequate understanding of what culture is and why cultural differences exist, and understanding the need to be tolerant of different cultures. Okay, so you could make up your own definition. You know, their class ends at 4, so don't be surprised when they leave at 4. Right? So, cultural intelligence, CQ. And this is also part of the definition. CQ is a person's capability to adapt as she interacts with others from different cultural regions. And this is not a remote possibility, it's reality for you guys, right? As you are interacting with students from other parts of the world, once you start working, that's going to be the same, okay? So that's why you gotta have this open-mindedness. You need to have curiosity about all these different cultures, and so on, right? And cultural intelligence comprises of a few things, and these are my original ideas, so that if you ever want to quote this, mention my name. And what is my name? So the first one, this one is not really mine, but as a whole, as a package, I'm saying. Okay? One is, so again, if you want to have a high CQ, this is what you need. Okay? One is diverse and knowledgeable worldview. And what do you mean by this? Globally competent individuals no longer view the world through a single cultural lens and are able to identify and appreciate various viewpoints. Did you notice that whenever you talk about something, people all have different views, don't they? Oftentimes, of course, they may agree with you, but oftentimes they also disagree with you, right? So you gotta understand that people have different views, different ideas. So the first thing that you need to cultivate for yourself is to have a diverse and knowledgeable worldview, sort of a not sort of a narrow, one-dimensional view, but round, right? Second aspect of cultural intelligence is what I call cultural empathy. Okay? The globally competent individual recognizes, respects, values cultural differences, and questions stereotypes of other cultures. Now, you know, this is something I learned when I was a graduate student, not graduate student, an undergraduate student, 15 years ago. Just kidding. That idea is still strongly sort of held by me. I mean, the message that the professor at the time sort of, the power, the impact of the message was so strong that, I kept on, so just, this became not just an idea that stuck with me, it became my attitude. So whenever I hear someone says, men or women or Koreans or French, Americans, when they make these generalizations, I always reply with questions. In my own head, that is. I don't say, how could you say that? Because that would become sort of a confrontational, right? The least I do is to ask myself, how could that be true? Why? Why is that phrase powerful? All stereotypes are wrong. Can you tell me one stereotype that is correct? So, for example, when someone says, Koreans eat dog meat, that is a stereotype, right? Why is that wrong? There you go. But in our daily conversation, we make so many stereotypical generalizations. Koreans are like this, Americans are like this, French are like this. Don't we do that all the time? And in Korea, we have a very strong, nasty regionalism, right? And we say, people from this area are like this, people from that area are like that. And if that were to become your attitude, you always say, how could that be true? I don't believe that shit. So that's, I want to really send this strong message to you very strongly, okay? And I want that to be part of your psyche, okay? Where it is wrong to make generalizations about different cultures, okay? Different people, okay? Different genders, okay? So, I hope this sticks with you, all right? So that's second, okay? The first one, sort of embracing diverse views, different views. Second, empathizing with the cultures of others that you interact with. Or even if you don't necessarily have an interaction with, being open-minded, having an empathy for whomever or which particular culture that you're dealing with. Empathize with their causes or very existence, right? Third is intellectual humility. Google, I'm sure, if you're been reading about, the beauty of the workplace, Google, it's like the #1 place people want to work for, right? Since its founding, and until recently, the Google typically hired graduates of top universities. Not anymore. You know why? Because of this intellectual humility thing. If you are so full of yourself, and if you put these people who are full of themselves in the same room, in the same team, what happens? So over time, Google finally realized what makes a great team, what makes a team productive is not people who are, intellectually full of themselves, but people who are intellectually humble. And that means people who are, yes, educated, but they don't think that they're always right. Okay? Good. So you gotta develop this sense of intellectual humility that, yes, I have my own set of ideas, I have my own set of convictions, but ultimately, this sense of humility that you could be wrong too, that I could be wrong. Okay? So that's why Google finally has learned this lesson, and it selects best candidates in terms of their capabilities, okay? Not this degree on paper. Okay? And I've myself experienced many intellectually arrogant individuals, just terrible people to interact with. Okay? And I hope you never become that. Okay? Yes, you could be very intelligent, but why do you need to be also at the same time so, be intellectually